The Magnetism of Fear. The elevator's ascent felt like a descent into hell, each floor marking another circle of damnation. Felicia Hardy pressed her gloved palm against the cool steel wall, her silver hair cascading over the black leather of her catsuit like moonlight on obsidian. The numbers climbed 40, 50, 60, toward the apex of Stark Tower where something waited that shouldn't exist in any rational universe. "You sure about this, Cat?" The voice crackled through her earpiece, tinged with static and worry. "Since when am I ever sure about anything, Spider?" she whispered back, though her trademark smirk felt forced tonight. "But the alternative is letting whatever's up there turn half of Manhattan into marionettes." The elevator shuddered to a halt at the 78th floor. Through the gap in the doors, she glimpsed twisted metal sculptures that had once been office furniture, now bent into impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly. The fluorescent lights flickered in patterns that seemed almost purposeful, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. Felicia stepped into the corridor, her enhanced senses immediately assaulted by wrongness. The air tasted of copper and electricity, thick enough to choke on. Her luck powers, that inexplicable ability to shift probability in her favor, recoiled from whatever presence dominated this space, as if fortune itself feared to tread here. "Welcome, beautiful thief," the voice emerged from everywhere and nowhere, a harmony of frequencies that made her bones vibrate. At the corridor's end, where Tony Stark's penthouse should have been, reality warped like heated glass. A figure materialized from the distortion, humanoid but wrong, its flesh a patchwork of metallic implants and organic tissue that pulsed with magnetic fields. "Dr. Nathaniel Essex," Felicia breathed, recognizing the name from shield files she'd glimpsed during a previous heist. "Thought you were dead. Death is such a limited concept," Essex replied, his voice now emanating from speakers embedded in the walls themselves. "I've transcended such pedestrian concerns. Magnetism, dear Felicia, is the fundamental force of attraction and repulsion, the very essence of desire and fear. Tonight I'll demonstrate both." The building's steel skeleton groaned around them. Felicia felt the metal zippers on her suit tugging gently, then more insistently, as Essex's power began to assert itself. But she'd prepared for this. Her new suit was ceramic and carbon fiber, a gift from an admirer in the tech industry. "Nice parlor trick," she said, forcing lightness into her voice. "But I didn't come here to chat about physics," Essex laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "No, you came because of them." The elevator doors behind her exploded outward as a dozen figures emerged. Men and women in business attire, their eyes rolled back to show only whites, their movements jerky and unnatural. Each bore metallic implants at their temples, pulsing with the same sick light that emanated from Essex. "The Stark Industries Board of Directors," Essex explained conversationally. "I've given them an upgrade. Their neural implants are composed of a ferromagnetic alloy of my own design. I can control their thoughts, their actions, their very dreams." One of the controlled executives, a woman Felicia recognized from magazine covers, lurched forward with inhuman speed. Her manicured nails had been replaced with steel talons that scraped against the floor, leaving gouges in the hardwood. Felicia backflipped over the woman's swipe, her enhanced agility carrying her to the ceiling where she clung briefly before dropping behind another attacker. Her luck kicked in subtly. The man's foot caught on his own trouser cuff, sending him sprawling, but there were too many of them, and in the confined space even her supernatural fortune had limits. "You see, my dear Cat," Essex continued, his form beginning to shift and flow like mercury, "I've discovered that humans are surprisingly easy to magnetize. A few strategic implants, some genetic modification, and they become my willing puppets. Soon I'll have enough of them to bore me to death with your monologue," Felicia interrupted. Launching herself at the nearest controlled executive, she struck pressure points with surgical precision, hoping to disrupt the neural implants without killing the innocent people beneath the metal. The executive collapsed, but two more took his place. Their movements were becoming more coordinated, more predatory. Essex was learning to control them better with each passing moment. "You cannot win through violence alone," Essex said, his form now completely liquid metal, flowing across the walls like a living sculpture. "This is a new kind of war, a battle for the human soul, fought on the battlefield of neurology and physics." Felicia found herself backed against the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of New York's lights. Behind her, 78 stories of empty air. Before her, a dozen people who would die if she couldn't find a way to free them from Essex's control. "Why?" she asked, genuinely curious despite the desperate situation. "Why turn people into puppets? What's the point of ruling marionettes?" Essex's metallic form rippled with what might have been emotion, Have you ever been truly alone, Felicia? Not just physically isolated, but fundamentally different from every other conscious being? I achieved post-human consciousness decades ago, but the price was connection. I can manipulate matter and energy, but I cannot touch another soul, for a moment. Something almost human flickered in his distorted features. Through these implants I can experience human emotion again. I feel their fear, their love, their desperation. It's intoxicating. That's not connection, Felicia said softly, her voice carrying a weight of understanding that surprised even her. That's violation. These people aren't choosing to share their emotions with you. You're stealing them. One of the controlled executives, a young man who couldn't have been older than 30, suddenly stumbled, his hand flying to his temple as he screamed. Blood trickled from beneath the implant. The neural interface is degrading, Essex muttered, his attention momentarily focused on his victim. The human brain isn't designed for this level of magnetic manipulation. They're dying, Felicia realized with horror. The implants are killing them. A necessary sacrifice for scientific progress, Essex replied, but his voice lacked conviction. That hesitation was all Felicia needed. Her luck power, previously suppressed by the overwhelming wrongness of Essex's presence, suddenly flared to life. The building's electrical system, overloaded by the massive magnetic fields, began to fail in precisely the right sequence. The lights went out in a cascade, starting from the top floors and working downward. But instead of plunging them into darkness, the magnetic fields themselves began to emit a faint ethereal glow. Aurora borealis trapped in a Manhattan skyscraper. In that otherworldly light, Felicia moved with impossible grace. Her suit's ceramic components allowed her to slip between the controlled executives like smoke, her hands finding and disabling the neural implants with surgical precision. Each person she freed collapsed unconscious but breathing, their minds finally their own again. Impossible, Essex whispered, his metallic form beginning to lose cohesion as his concentration faltered. The probability calculations don't. Probability is just another word for luck, Felicia said, now standing face to face with the transformed scientist. And I've always been very lucky. But as she reached for what she hoped was Essex's core processing unit, his form suddenly solidified around her hand, trapping her in living metal that burned cold against her skin. If I cannot have companionship, Essex snarled, his voice now purely electronic, then I will settle for company in death. The windows behind them began to crack under the magnetic stress. Felicia felt the metal in the building's structure groaning, bending beyond its tolerances. Essex was preparing to collapse the entire floor, taking them all down in a twisted murder-suicide. You're right about one thing, Felicia said, her trapped hand beginning to lose feeling. You are alone, but it doesn't have to stay that way. Essex's grip loosened slightly. What do you mean? Help me save these people, she whispered. Really save them, not just free them from the implants. Use your power to stabilize the building, keep it from collapsing. Show me that there's still something human left in all that metal. For a long moment the only sound was the groaning of stressed steel and the whisper of magnetic fields in flux. Then slowly the pressure around her hand began to ease. I had forgotten what it felt like to choose, Essex said, his voice small and wondering. To act from compassion rather than compulsion. The building's structure began to stabilize, the magnetic fields shifting from destructive chaos to supportive reinforcement. The controlled executives, now free but unconscious, lay safely on the floor, their breathing steady and natural. Thank you, Felicia said simply. Essex's form began to dissipate, the metallic components separating and falling to the floor like rain. I think I need to sleep now, for a very long time. As the magnetic fields finally faded, the building's lights flickered back to life. In the sudden normalcy of electric illumination, the horror of the past hour seemed almost dreamlike. Felicia knelt beside the unconscious executives, checking their vital signs and finding them stable. Cat, talk to me, Spider-Man's voice crackled through her earpiece. I'm here, she said, settling back against the wall with exhaustion she hadn't realized she felt. It's over. What happened up there? The magnetic readings went crazy, then just stopped. Felicia looked at the scattered metal components that had once been Dr. Nathaniel Essex, thinking about loneliness and connection, about the choices that made us human or monster. Sometimes, she said finally, the best way to win is to help your enemy remember who they used to be. Outside the windows, New York sparkled with the lights of 8 million souls, each one alone yet connected by invisible threads of shared humanity. And high above them all, a cat burglar sat in the darkness, understanding perhaps for the first time that even luck couldn't fill the spaces between hearts. Only compassion could do that. The police sirens were already wailing in the distance, growing closer. Soon there would be questions and reports and the comfortable mundanity of official investigation. But for now, in the quiet aftermath of terror, Felicia Hardy simply sat with the sleeping victims of a madman's loneliness and felt grateful for the strange, dangerous, wonderful web of connection that bound them all together. Even monsters, she reflected, were just people who had forgotten how to be found.